Caitlin Clark was cleared to play weeks before she actually returned, but fans only found out after medical professionals exposed the lie. While coach Stephanie White and the Indiana Fever publicly called Clark's condition day-to-day, sports physicians were sounding the alarm. Groin and quad strains like Clark's don't heal in days. They require weeks of rest, rehab, and monitoring, none of which lined up with the team's version of events. As more timestamps and expert opinions surfaced, it became clear that the injury narrative wasn't a miscommunication. It was a calculated effort to manipulate expectations, minimize backlash, and preserve playoff momentum, regardless of what that meant for Clark's body or the public's trust. The backlash has been relentless. What began as quiet confusion escalated into full-blown scrutiny as video clips, interviews, and inconsistent timelines began circulating online. Stephanie White became the face of the scandal, her credibility unraveling with every contradicting statement. The damage isn't limited to one coach or one team. It signals a deeper problem within professional sports, the dangerous prioritization of optics over athlete health. This saga won't fade quickly. It has raised uncomfortable questions about leadership, accountability, and the ethics of sidelining truth for PR control. That's the truth, confirmed by doctors, exposed by fans, and now publicly undeniable. But that revelation didn't come easily. It came after weeks of confusion, misdirection, and a mounting scandal that's now sitting squarely on the shoulders of Indiana Fever head coach Stephanie White. What started as a simple day-to-day injury update spiraled into a full-blown credibility crisis.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
The team's official story was that Clark had suffered a minor issue, something small enough that she'd be back in a game or two. Nothing to worry about, they said. She was fine. She was healing. She'd be ready soon. But almost immediately, that narrative started to fall apart. Medical experts, doctors, and even physical therapists who examined the available footage and team reports publicly contradicted the team's claim. They said the words every fan dreaded to hear. This was no minor injury. Caitlin Clark had suffered multiple strains, quad, groin, and possibly even a hip issue. Real injuries. The kind that requires serious recovery time, not a casual few days off. The timeline the Fever provided wasn't just optimistic. It was impossible. Experts pointed out that these types of injuries need weeks, not days. Rehabilitation, rest, gradual return. Instead, the team's updates kept painting a rosy picture. Clark was day-to-day. She was progressing well. She was ready to go soon. Soon became later. Later became silence. And silence turned into suspicion. Fans began digging. Reporters started asking harder questions. Every interview Stephanie White gave seemed to change the story a little more. At first, she claimed the injury wasn't serious. Then she said it was precautionary. Then she backtracked, calling it something the team was still evaluating. Every time she spoke, something didn't add up. Meanwhile, the evidence piled up. Screenshots, clips, and timelines flooded social media. People noticed how the team had shifted the dates around, how their own statements contradicted previous updates. There were videos where Clark looked fine, training, practicing, and even moving fluidly long before the team claimed she was cleared. It became impossible to ignore. Independent medical professionals stepped in again, confirming that if Clark had truly been injured as described, she wouldn't have been moving like that. She was already healthy, and she'd been healthy, which meant the entire injury narrative, the day-to-day updates, the vague press releases, the slow recovery storyline, was a fabrication. And that's when the story exploded. The outrage wasn't just about an injury. It was about dishonesty, about how far a team and coach would go to protect optics, even if it meant misleading everyone, fans, reporters, and possibly even Clark herself. The question became clear: why lie? The answer, it seemed, came down to desperation. The Fever were in a tough spot, fighting for playoff relevance, battling negative press, and relying heavily on Clark's name to keep the team in headlines. Admitting that their star was injured, really injured, would mean admitting vulnerability. It would mean risk. So instead of telling the truth, They spun the story. Stephanie White stood at the center of it. Her interviews became case studies in contradiction. One day, she said Clark was almost ready. Another day, she said they were being cautious. Then, she insisted that Clark was fully cleared, but couldn't explain why she hadn't returned yet. The inconsistency wasn't subtle. Fans clipped together her statements side by side, posting compilations that showed her backpedaling, dodging, and contradicting her own words. It got so bad that some of her own press conferences turned chaotic. Reporters pressed her for clarity, but her answers only made things worse. She said Clark was improving, but refused to confirm any medical detail. She mentioned precautionary holds, but couldn't identify who made those decisions. When confronted with conflicting statements from team doctors, she claimed she wasn't aware of certain reports. Statements that only reinforced how disconnected and disorganized the communication had become. By then, the truth was out. Clark's injuries had been exaggerated, and her recovery had been manipulated for PR. The fan base felt betrayed. Social media erupted with outrage. Memes mocked White's interviews. Hashtags calling out the cover-up started trending. Fans called it one of the most obvious injury fabrications in years. Sports analysts compared it to notorious NFL and NBA scandals where teams concealed player health for competitive advantage. The backlash wasn't just online. It hit in the locker room, too. Players and coaches across the league began making subtle comments about transparency and honesty, clearly aimed at the Fever situation. Journalists stopped holding back. They called it what it was, a blatant attempt to mislead the public to protect a playoff narrative and maintain revenue momentum. And in the middle of all that noise stood Stephanie White, her reputation falling apart in real time. This wasn't just a PR failure. It was a leadership failure. When you're a head coach, you're the face of truth for your team. Fans trust you. Players depend on your honesty. The moment you lose that credibility, you lose everything. And White's credibility, once solid, is now in shambles. Even worse, it's not just her reputation that's at risk. It's the integrity of the Fever organization. Because if a team is willing to lie about an injury, what else are they willing to hide? What other decisions are made in the shadows of optics and strategy? Caitlin Clark, for her part, handled it quietly. When she finally confirmed she was healthy and had been cleared much earlier than the team claimed, it was like a pin dropping in a room full of gas fumes. Everyone knew what that meant. The speculation was over. The team had been caught. The fallout was swift. The Fever's media credibility tanked. Press conferences grew tense. Every update from the team was now met with skepticism. Is this true? Became the default response from fans and journalists alike. The damage wasn't just immediate, it was lasting. And for Stephanie White, this may be the moment her career turns a corner she can't come back from. Because when a coach loses the trust of her players, her fan base, and the media, it's over. The title, the wins, the stats, they stop matching. What's left is a reputation that can't be repaired. The lesson here is brutal but simple. Honesty isn't optional. In professional sports, credibility is currency. The second you start manipulating narratives, you bankrupt it. Fans aren't naive. They notice the details. They cross-check quotes, compare timelines, analyze body language. And in the age of social media, nothing stays hidden. One contradictory interview can turn into a viral expose in hours. And that's exactly what happened here. Stephanie White and the Fever thought they could protect the team's image with selective storytelling. Instead, they destroyed it. They underestimated the audience. They underestimated how quickly information spreads. Now, the entire saga has become a cautionary tale. For players, it's a reminder to take control of their own narratives, to speak up when something doesn't add up. For coaches, it's proof that hiding the truth only makes the fallout worse. And for fans, it's validation that demanding transparency isn't overreaction, it's accountability. Because this wasn't just a communication error, it was a betrayal of trust. Clark's health was fine. She was ready to play. But the people around her chose to hide that. Whether it was to protect playoff optics, media storylines, or Stephanie White's reputation, the motive doesn't matter anymore. The damage is done. And once trust is gone, No press release or apology can rebuild it. Today, the story isn't about whether Caitlin Clark is healthy. It's about what happens when the truth finally catches up to the people who thought they could outsmart it. Stephanie White's image as a steady leader is gone. Her credibility is cracked. Her leadership is under question. And the Fever? They're facing a fan base that doesn't believe them anymore. So if there's one takeaway from all this, it's this. The truth always wins. It might take time, it might get messy, but it always comes out. And when it does, the fallout is worse than whatever short-term embarrassment honesty might have caused. Caitlin Clark's recovery story could have been one of resilience. Instead, it became one of manipulation. And no one, not the coach, not the team, not the PR department, can spin that away now. If you followed this entire scandal, you already know what comes next. Scrutiny, apologies, and damage control. But none of it will fix what was broken. Because once you've lied to your fans, the trust is gone for good. If you agree that transparency should always come before PR spin, go ahead and like this video. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Was this a cover-up or a misstep that spiraled out of control? And don't forget to subscribe, because the fallout from this scandal is far from over, and you'll want to be here when the next chapter drops. The team, led by head coach Stephanie White, continued to push a day-to-day story that didn't just mislead the public. It actively buried the truth. And that truth, it's devastating for everyone involved. Because this wasn't a case of a coach being out of the loop or a miscommunication between medical staff and media teams. This was a cover-up, a carefully curated lie, one designed to protect image, standings, and maybe, just maybe, someone's job. The most damning part is how avoidable it all was. Injuries happen. Groin and quad strains? Tough but common. Athletes miss time all the time. But the issue here wasn't that Clark got hurt. It's that the team decided to spin it, and then got caught. They underestimated how sharp her fan base is. They underestimated how quickly people would start connecting the dots. They underestimated how loud the internet gets when it smells BS. And once fans started digging, it was over. You had video footage from practice sessions, Clark sprinting, cutting, stretching with ease, all while the team claimed she was questionable. You had media appearances where she smiled, nodded, and subtly hinted that she was fine, while her coach insisted she wasn't ready. You had press conferences where White seemed confused by her own team's updates, stumbling through injury reports, dodging questions, making excuses. At some point, it stopped being an oversight. It became obvious deception. And once that line was crossed, there was no walking it back. Let's talk about Stephanie White, because this scandal isn't just haunting the franchise, it's sitting directly on her shoulders. This was her decision, her message, her image, or at least it was. Now, her reputation is spiraling. This is the same coach who was praised for her leadership, the same one who was supposed to guide Caitlin Clark's transition into professional basketball. But instead of protecting her player, she protected the brand. She chose silence. She chose misdirection. And she chose to prioritize the appearance of control over the reality of honesty. And that is the kind of decision that sticks. You don't just get to lie to the media, contradict medical professionals, mislead your fan base, and then throw your hands up when the backlash hits. Not when the receipts are everywhere. Not when fans are rolling out side-by-side clips of your changing storylines like a courtroom exhibit. The damage isn't just reputational, it's structural. You now have a coaching figure whose every update is met with skepticism. A locker room filled with players who've watched their teammate get used as a pawn. A franchise that's lost the public trust. And good luck getting that back. Because now the conversation has shifted. This is no longer just about Caitlin Clark. It's about the pattern. Fans are pointing to similar situations. Other teams, other leagues, other players, where injuries were conveniently downplayed, timelines mysteriously changed, and athletes were pushed to return before they were ready, all in the name of competitiveness. This story lit a match under a much bigger conversation. How often are teams hiding behind fake injury timelines to protect their agendas? And if Clark, the biggest name in the sport right now, isn't safe from that, then who is? This isn't hypothetical anymore. It's precedent. The media caught it. Fans caught it. Even opposing teams are whispering about it. This one incident just exposed an entire culture where teams bend the truth, manipulate updates, and use health as a PR tool instead of a sacred responsibility. And here's the kicker. They still try to save face. After everything came out, after doctors debunked their timeline, after videos showed Clark was fine, the Fever still never offered a full explanation. Just vague acknowledgments, awkward post-game interviews, and at most, half-hearted clarifications. But that's not good enough. Because this wasn't just about miscommunication, it was deception with consequences. What if Clark had gone back in before she was ready because the team pushed her too early? What if the narrative had pressured her into returning out of fear of being labeled soft? What if another athlete is sitting in a locker room right now, going through the same thing, thinking, if they lied about her, they'll lie about me too? This isn't drama for the sake of drama. It's about safety, and it's about power. Because at the end of the day, Clark had no control over the messaging around her own health. That power rested with the franchise, and the franchise abused it. The risk wasn't just to her career. It was to the foundation of trust between players and leadership. Once you lose that, your entire organization is broken. And the coach? She's the face of it. Stephanie White may never shake this. Her statements are etched into the discourse now. Fans have the timestamps. They've made the comparisons. They've watched her duck and dodge questions in real time. No matter how many wins she racks up, this stain isn't going anywhere. You don't come back from this by changing your tune. You come back by telling the truth from the beginning. And that ship has sailed. Now every future update she gives, whether about injuries, lineups, or strategies, will be questioned. And deservedly so. You cannot ask for trust when you've broken it this publicly. And the fallout? It's far from over. Reporters are digging deeper. Editorials are dropping daily. Podcasts, analysts, influencers, everyone is dissecting what this means for Clark, the team, and the league. And most importantly, Clark's fan base, the people who helped build the WNBA's current momentum, feel betrayed. They showed up. They watched. They bought the jerseys. And now they're wondering if everything they were told was just spin. Because when the league's brightest star gets caught in a cover-up, it makes everything else feel fake. This is bigger than one athlete. It's a mirror held up to an entire system. And unless teams and coaches start valuing transparency over temporary gain, this won't be the last scandal. It'll be the beginning of a very public reckoning. So let's get real. This story isn't about a pulled muscle or a missed game. It's about leadership. It's about what kind of culture you want in professional sports. One built on honesty, accountability, and trust, or one that plays damage control until the truth leaks out anyway. Clark's fine, but the trust? That's the thing that's still broken. And rebuilding it will take a whole lot more than PR. The worst part in all of this? It didn't have to end like this. This could have been handled with one honest press conference, one transparent update, one sentence of accountability. But instead, they try to bluff their way through it. They counted on the public to forget, to move on, to trust the brand over the facts. And now, the brand is cracked. The credibility is gone. What's left is the uncomfortable truth. The Indiana Fever willingly misled their audience about the health of the biggest star in the sport. And Stephanie White was the one speaking into microphones the entire time. That's the kind of decision that doesn't fade after a few news cycles. It lingers. Because once you lie about someone's health, especially a generational athlete like Caitlin Clark, people remember. They remember how you spun it. They remember the doublespeak. They remember the moment they stopped believing the updates. Now, every time Stephanie White steps in front of camera, there's an invisible asterisk hanging in the air. Not because she's a bad coach, but because she made a choice. A choice to protect the optics instead of protecting the truth. And that choice has consequences. The fans? They're not letting this go. They built a movement around Clark. She was more than a player. She was hope. For growth, for change, for a new era of women's basketball. And now that hope feels manipulated, used to protect a narrative that wasn't real. And what does this teach other players? That if you get hurt, your story might not be your own? That your recovery could be twisted into a team strategy? That your body might become a bargaining chip in a playoff race? That's not leadership. That's exploitation. This scandal peeled back the curtain on how quickly trust can erode when transparency takes a back seat. And even though Clark's fine, thankfully, the scar from this moment will last much longer than the injury ever would have. So where do we go from here? Maybe this forces the league to rethink its priorities. Maybe coaches and execs finally understand that honesty isn't a threat, it's protection. Not just for players, but for the institution itself. Maybe, just maybe, this is the moment professional sports stops treating the truth like a liability. Because no amount of winning makes up for a reputation built on spin. If you're still following this mess, you're not alone. This isn't just another headline. It's a turning point. For fans, for players, for how we expect our sports leaders to act when things get tough. So yeah, this one matters. And we'll be watching what comes next. Like the video if you see through the noise. Share your thoughts below. Was this a leadership failure or something deeper? And hit subscribe to stay locked in. Because if this season's taught us anything, it's that the real stories don't play out on the scoreboard. They play out after the press conference ends.